We have done the preamble and given the background of the sutta, as well as giving you an overview of the structure of the sutta. We have gone through the abstract and definition. We've gone through Anapana section, the sections on postures and clear knowing. In the preamble, I said that it's a good first step to have a micro view of the suttas, to check the claims of various teachers. Since there are so many methods available now, with modern means of communication, even if you don't go and attend lectures, you can just sit in front of a computer, go to YouTube and click on many DIY meditation courses. There are so many resources available in the internet, as well as Dharma speakers and meditation teachers going around the world teaching their own techniques. So it's a good thing that people are beginning to have the interest to study the suttas in more detail, getting back to the roots. However, it's also important to have a micro view, right? To prevent the macro view, in order to prevent the development of a fanatical partisan mindset. That seems to be a very common human weakness, tending to cling on to their teachers, their traditions, their methods, and so forth. Their belief, their scriptures. Right? So having a macro view, knowing that our suttas are not entirely that reliable after all, humbles us. Right? Even if you want to quote the sutta, even if you know the sutta by heart, you could tone down yourself and say, this is what I heard. This is what my teacher told me. You don't know how true that is. So it's good for us to realize, to understand that our extant sets of scriptures took many centuries to be compiled and recorded because of poor communication, and also because the Buddha preached in many dialects. So no sutta can be 100% authentic, but elements common to all schools and traditions have the highest chances of authenticity. Right? This is the common rule of thumb that modern scholars use. Although there is another modern scholar by the name of Scopen who challenges this view, and he says that if it is common to all schools, it may be because of some conspiracy theory. They've conspired, to perpetuate a legend of something that they have in mind. For example, look at this Theravadan legend of the Buddha coming down from Tavatimsa after 3 months of preaching the Abhidhamma to his former mother, who was reborn in Tusita, and he came down to Tavatimsa to listen to his talk on Abhidhamma. And then he supposedly walked down the staircase. I don't know why he would need a staircase. He walked down the staircase and landed in Sankisa. There. And so this is peculiar to the Theravada tradition. When you look at Asma Analayo recently wrote a paper about this, and he made a comparative study with other schools, other scriptural traditions, and he found that they also had this story, but it's not in connection with Abhidhamma, something else. So it seems that this story, although it occurs in many traditions, it's not necessarily authentic. The primary aim of Buddhist education is to get the right information for effective practice to reduce the influence of defilements and eventually to liberate the mind from them completely. Right? That's the most important thing. It's not important whether you get a diploma, or a PhD, or whatever title, and we don't issue any certificates here for participation as well. Although in some places I went to, they had certificates of participation. That's not important whether you participate or not. And what is important is whatever you have collected, is it the right information or not? Will it help to make your practice more effective in order to reduce the influence of the defilements, and then eventually to liberate the mind from the defilements? Remember, the defilements don't belong to you, according to the Buddha. They are visitors, and your mind is pure. So don't try to fight with them. You can try to practice in an effective way in order to keep them at bay. Okay? Then the next one is right practice should result in a positive transformation of character, reflected in such attitudes as being more patient, forgiving, understanding, open-minded, accepting, humble, selfless, etc. Right? If you follow a particular technique and then you find that you're becoming more conceited and you're beginning to be more and more exclusive and saying that only you are on the right path and everybody else is wrong, something is wrong somewhere. Okay, now when we talked about the background and structure of the sutta, we found that there was no background story in the sutta itself, in the Pali Canon, but the commentary filled it in, with an interesting story about the parrot who did bone meditation. Ajahn Sujato's research suggests that it is not that this sutta, Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta that we have now in the Majjhima Nikaya, as well as that in the Digha Nikaya, is not authentic, but is a composite of extracts from other suttas plus other added materials. This is also agreed by Professor Guan Zhe-Fu from Taiwan, and he has also made other conclusions from his research. The backbone of the sutta is the Vipassana refrain. Ajahn Sujato's reconstructed Satipaṭṭhāna Mula has very few exercises and does not have a Vipassana refrain. Right? Somebody asked whether that seventh option in the refrain is indicative of dry insight meditation. But Ajahn Sujato says that this refrain itself, the whole refrain, is something that has been inserted by Theravada tradition, which favors this dry insight meditation practice. Looking at the abstract and definition, we found that the word ekayano should not be translated as the only way or the one and the only way, but it's the one way, one going way. It leads to one direction. And also we found that when the scholars made a research into literature that was around during the Buddha's time, non-Buddhist literature, the usage of this word ekayano suggests that it is a confluence, a convergence, one confluence way, ekayano maggo, and which means that there are 4 Satipaṭṭhānas and all of them converge to the goals that are stated by the Buddha in the proclamation. Then the second is about sati. Sati is awareness of past objects, although popularly translated nowadays as mindfulness and equated with present moment awareness. Sammajjhano is clear knowing, and it is applicable to all the 4 Satipaṭṭhānas, not just to contemplation of the body. Although worldly longing and dejection need not be totally removed, one must be able to subdue them in order to step back and observe them objectively. Looking at Anapana section, the Buddha did not specify where to focus attention while being mindful of breathing. Right? Although people say that the word parimukha means around the mouth, we saw that the word parimukha is a Pali idiom which means giving priority to. Experiencing the whole body can be interpreted and practiced in 2 ways which are both reasonable. Right? One way is the Visuddhimagga way. Visuddhimagga was composed about 430 CE, but it was based on Paticambbhidamagga, which would have been earlier, much earlier than that. And according to those 2 texts, it seems that experiencing the whole body means experiencing the whole breath body. As you breathe in, the beginning, middle and end. But there's also the other book called the Mahavibhasha, which is a Sarvastivadin commentary, written about 280 years earlier than the Visuddhimagga, which says that the whole body here means literally the whole body, and it also it pertains to the breathing. As during our sharing session just now, presenting, some of you said that whole body means, being aware of the 5 senses, besides just the body. And some say it's the physical sensations. But because this is a section on Anapana, it should be the body that is connected with the breathing, whether it's a breath body or the parts of the body where breathing is taking place. Right, so according to the Mahavibhasha, and according to Ajahn Thanissaro, it is possible that when your breathing gets more and more subtle, you can perceive breathing not only through your nose but through the pores in your body, and that requires special training. Right? I'm sure many of you have not heard of it. It's probably the first time that you have heard about it, right? So it requires special training. That's why the word train is there. Initially the first one is just remember that you are breathing. The second is, as you remember your breathing, then you will come to know whether your breath is long or short. But then this next step is about training the mind to experience the whole body, experiencing the breathing in the whole body, not just at the nostrils or the lungs or the abdomen. So whichever way it is, if it works for you, it makes you more composed, makes your mind clearer, and you can see things more profoundly in terms of the 3 characteristics, and it helps you to reduce your defilements, then go ahead and try it. Now, another very, very important thing which I forgot to mention is that nothing is mentioned about shifting your attention from the breath to a nimitta, or reflex image, which is the current practice based on the Visuddhimagga. Visuddhimagga says that Anapanasati starts off with watching the breath. Then as you watch the breath, it becomes more and more subtle. Then you cannot find the breath anymore. But in that process, while your breathing becomes more and more subtle, a nimitta or an image might arise. And they say that when that image arises and your breath becomes so subtle you cannot locate it, then stop watching the breath and focus on the image. And make that mental image, usually it's visual. Nowadays it's supposed to be a visual, crystal clear, a literal crystal image, like a real crystal, and transparent and bright and unblemished. And you're able to maintain that, then you stop watching the breath altogether and you just focus your attention on that image, and then you get absorbed. That is a Visuddhimagga version of absorption. That is called a nimitta in the Visuddhimagga. But nothing is mentioned about the nimitta in the Anapanasati Sutta or in this Kaya Vipassana about Anapana. So this is one observation. There are 2 ways of interpreting internal and external. One is the literal meaning. It means internally yourself, externally means somebody else. And there's canonical evidence to show that this could be what is meant. We will come to it later. The other way is by inference. As you watch your breath or watch your bodily movements, or more important, watch your feelings and your mental states and your mental reactions. And then you come to realize that they don't belong to you. They arise due to causes and conditions. Then you can apply that externally to another person by inference. Just as these emotions come and go without my willing them to do so, it must also happen in the same way to them. And that person is not to be blamed. He's not really responsible for it. He is a victim of all these visiting defilements. So when you're able to perceive things in that way, that will naturally lead to more understanding, being more forgiving, being more patient, right? So that's why some teachers that are like Sayadaw U Tejani maintains that it's not really necessary to do metta meditation. It says if you really watch your mind and you understand your mind, automatically the 4 Brahma Viharas will arise, because you begin to empathize and sympathize with other beings, knowing that we are all the same, we are all in the same boat. We're all the same, and yet there's no one there. Okay? This is the paradox, but that's the way it is. Okay, now postures and clear knowing. We saw that labeling during meditation is an expedient tool recommended even in the sutta. It could be very useful for beginners. One should know where to put a stop to it. Yeah, if you keep on doing it excessively, then it might impair the development of your wisdom. Then I also introduced the bar test to process intentions, which is useful under all circumstances. Remember the 4 R's of sati. One of them is, the last one is introspection, right? Looking back at what is happening in your mind. So if you are able to catch the intentions before you pursue a thought or an idea or a plan or a scheme or a strategy, before you want to say something, before you want to act out something, then you can process it according to the bar test. Is it beneficial? Is it appropriate? Is it relevant to me? Is it realistic? Alright? And then if it doesn't pass the test, then forget it. Drop it. Come back to your whatever you are doing. It's also a myth that one should not think during meditation, because proper, wise or thorough reflection and deliberation, I'm sure that many of you have been conditioned to think that way. Right? Not meditation means no thinking, no thinking. Just keep your mind blank. Although excessive thinking also is not good. You know that it will be a cause for a lot of discursive thinking. You try to keep thinking down to the minimum, but you need to think about how to practice. You need to think to remember instructions, you know, and to think in order to, how do I say, be versatile enough to change your techniques or your practice according to circumstances. So this is what the Buddha, calls yoniso manasikara, looking at things from a wise way. You reflect upon things. Sometimes you don't see things, you don't really experience the arising and passing away of phenomena, but you can reflect, saying, oh, things are all impermanent anyway. They're all part of nature, they arise and pass away, there's no one there. And you can do that reflection as a part of right view, and because you have that outlook, then things will not be so bad after all. Yeah, you're able to let go of things. Even though you may not see them directly and experientially, that view, that right view, that thinking is helpful. Okay, that's all we have for today. Before we go on to sharing our merits, making aspirations, any more questions or sharing from anyone?